I don't feel like my name is important to what I'm about to tell you. I'm 26 now, and this happened 2 years ago. I've gone back and forth for quite a while about writing this, mostly because I didn't know how to say it without sounding unstable, and I'm still not sure I do, but we're going to give it a go. I was alone in northern British Columbia, in the Muskwa-Ketchika area. I won't be more specific than that. Anyone who knows the region understands how empty it is. I was there for a solo bushcraft and survival practice, which I do quite regularly, or I used to do regularly. I wasn't sightseeing or pushing my limits. This was a routine for me. I've spent years outdoors. I know wolves, bears, moose, big cats. I know the sounds. I know what belongs and what doesn't. It all happened a few hours before sunrise, late fall, just before winter really sets in. It was cold enough that everything around was carrying sound well, and there was no wind that night. The first thing that bothered me wasn't seeing anything, it was the sounds. I began to hear these low growls. They weren't loud, they didn't sound aggressive right away. They were just there. It was mixed in with what I would call a humming sound that didn't make sense. Metallic is the only way I can describe it. Not mechanical exactly, but steady. There were clicking sounds too, short and spaced out. Sounds that did not belong out in nature. Shortly after I noticed the smell. Rotten eggs or sulfur. Strong enough that I checked the area around my camp thinking something had died nearby. It didn't smell like decay, though. It was much sharper. The forest also went quiet. Not the normal quiet you get at night. It was deeper than that. I've experienced silence in the woods before, but this was different. Like everything had just up and left. I started packing my stuff slowly. Not because I was panicking, but because something felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. I didn't see it right away. I could tell something was moving around me. Wide movement. Not brushing or breaking branches, no heavy footsteps, just something changing its position. When I finally spotted it, it was about 20 to 40 yards away. Never closer than that, but never farther away either. The head is what I noticed first. A huge canine head, bigger than any wolf could possibly be. The eyes were amber and bright, reflection. They were just there, huge. The ears were pointed like a wolf's, but much larger. It stood on two legs. I can't tell you exact measurements, but it was over 7 feet tall easily. The build was thick, heavy. I'd guess this thing was 300 to 400 pounds, maybe more. It wasn't skinny or starved. It looked solid. I don't really remember one specific detail standing out. I remember all of it at once, which is part of the problem. It's not a clear image, it's the event itself that has broken me. It moved around me in a way I didn't expect. Quiet, fast, always staying just out of my full view. When it did move, it was upright, never dropped down to all fours. It reacted to my presence there. I didn't feel hunted, I felt like I didn't belong, like I wasn't welcome. Territorial fits better. I tried to leave without rushing, making slow movements, no sudden turns. I didn't want to trigger any predatory responses. The mistake I made was speaking out loud. I said something, I can't remember exactly what, but it was probably something stupid. I thought maybe sounding human would help in some way. It did not. The growling changed. It got louder. The clicking sounds picked up. The humming came back stronger. It started doing short bluff charges toward me. Not full rushes, but enough to let me know it could close the distance whenever it felt like it. I stopped talking. I did have a handgun. I always carry one in remote areas. It didn't matter. I knew immediately it would not help. Drawing it would have made things worse. I never even touched it. I kept my eyes on it at first. That felt wrong as well, like I was challenging it. At some point I looked down, not intentionally at first, just breaking eye contact. Then I stayed that way. Kept my head lowered. Kept my eyes on the ground. I wasn't thinking in terms of dominance or submission. I just knew staring was making it worse. Its behavior changed completely when I did that. The charges stopped. The growling stayed. But it was different, less explosive. I backed away slowly without looking up. I didn't grab my gear, I just left everything. I didn't turn my back, I didn't run. It let me leave. I never heard it following. I didn't hear it leave either. That as quiet as it was when it moved, even if it was following me, I probably wouldn't have known. I walked until my legs felt like they were going to give out. When I felt far enough away, I didn't stop. I just kept moving until daylight. After that, things changed. I started having nightmares. Not every night, but often enough. I stopped sleeping well. I replayed the sounds more than the image. The clicking and the hum come back to me the most. I don't go out alone anymore. No more solo trips for me. No solo camping. I still do outdoor stuff, but only with other people now. I didn't tell anyone this for a long time. I tried to handle it on my own. That was a mistake. Keeping it inside does not help. I finally decided to share this because I don't think ignoring it is the right move anymore. If something like this is out there, people should at least be aware that not everything in the woods fits what we've been taught to expect. Talking about it doesn't make it easier, but it feels better than pretending that it didn't happen. Thanks for giving people a place to say things like this without being laughed at. Anonymous. Reels. I'm 34 years old, but my encounter took place when I was only 19. You can call me Aaron. I've never sent it in to anyone before because I didn't think anyone would take it seriously. And honestly, I didn't want to deal with the fallout. It was in central Idaho, outside of Challis, in the Salmon Challis National Forest. I won't name the drainage, but it was on public land, high desert timber, broken ridges, and open slopes. Not really super thick forest. I was working for a fencing contractor that summer. We camped rough and moved site to site. I grew up hunting and riding horses. I wasn't new to being alone in the outdoors. This happened in the early morning, just after first light. I remember it was cold as hell, super thick frost on the ground. I was walking fence line by myself, checking posts, when I noticed something off with the wildlife. Not silence, movement. Rabbits and grouse were crossing open ground without reacting to me at all. A mule deer ran straight downhill past me, close enough that I could hear it breathing. That does not happen. I stopped walking and waited. That's when I saw it. This dog man was standing on a slope about 30 yards away, above me, upright, standing still. At first glance, my brain tried to make it a bear standing up. That didn't last. The legs were not right for a bear. They were too straight, too thick. The arms also did not match a bear. The front legs, they hung down farther than they should have. The head was canine, no question. More narrow than a bear, its ears upright and tall. Long snout. Its eyes seemed to catch the light. Yellow. Not reflective like a cat, just steady. It never approached me. What it did was worse, in my opinion. It watched everything else. I realized then that the animals weren't reacting to me at all. They were reacting to this thing. Every time something moved in the area, its head tracked it. I took a step back, and it shifted its weight and leaned forward. That was enough movement for me. Enough for me to know that what I was seeing was a living, breathing creature. I backed away downhill, keeping it in my peripheral vision. I didn't want its attention at all, so I kept my movements to a minimum. As soon as I broke line of sight with the ridge, I heard something else move behind me. It was not this thing, it was something smaller. Whatever had been frozen before was moving again. When I looked back up, it was gone. I heard no sound as it retreated, as it was making no crashing sounds. It was just gone. I didn't go back up that line. I told my boss I was sick and stayed in camp the rest of the day. For a very long time, what bothered me wasn't fear, it was mostly confusion, I guess. I couldn't make sense of the way it behaved. It wasn't hunting, it wasn't defending a kill, it was managing the area. I stopped doing outdoor work after that summer. I moved into a trade that keeps me around people. I do still hunt, but I don't go deep alone anymore. I'm not really scared. I just don't trust my assumptions the way I used to. I'm willing to share this because I hear people talk about strange animals like they're just misidentified bears or wolves. I don't argue with them, but I'll just say, and I just know, what I saw did not fit into that nice little neat box or explanation. Thank you, Anonymous. Reels. I'm 41, and my encounter happened over 20 years ago. My name is Chris. You can use it. I've told parts of this a couple of people over the years, and this is the first time I've ever told it start to finish to anyone. It was in northern Minnesota outside of Cook County, near a stretch of logging roads that cut through the area. I won't give the exact road, but it was public land, but not somewhere people go unless they have a reason. Now, my reason was I was working seasonal maintenance for a resort at the time. I knew that area well. I drove those roads daily. I wasn't lost, and I wasn't unfamiliar with the wildlife. I remember that it was late afternoon. It was in early winter. There was a bit of snow on the ground, but it wasn't deep yet. It was enough that you could see animal tracks. I had driven out to check a locked gate that had been reported open. When I got there, the gate was fine. I turned the truck around and headed back. When I headed back, there was something standing in the road. At first, because of the size, I thought it was a moose. That lasted about half a second. It was standing in the middle of the road, facing sideways like it hadn't noticed me yet. It was fully upright. I didn't see any hunched postures. It wasn't leaning on anything. I stopped the truck about 50 foot away. Immediately, I wasn't hit with fear. I was hit with the size and scale of such a beast. This thing was too tall. way too wide across the shoulders. The legs were straight under it, not bent like an animal's. This thing had similarities to human, but upscaled to a size that was ridiculous. The head was without a doubt canine. There's no misidentifying what I saw. I saw its long snout. I saw its pointed ears up and slightly back. Its fur was dark, not jet black, more like deep brown mixed with gray, thick around its neck and shoulders. It turned its head and looked directly at me. That's when my body reacted. I felt my chest tighten, and my hand started shaking on the steering wheel. I realized my chest tightened because I had stopped breathing. I was holding my breath. It only took one step toward my truck. That step closed the distance enough that I could see the shape of the muscles in this thing's legs and shoulders under its fur. It wasn't sick. It wasn't thin. This thing was solid. This thing was heavy. This was the ultimate killing machine in my eyes. I did have a rifle in the truck behind the seat. I didn't reach for it. I knew I wouldn't have time to get it out before whatever happened next. I just put the truck in reverse slowly. I remember how loud the snow crunching under the tires was at the time. It reacted immediately as I started moving. It stepped forward again, faster this time, and raised its head slightly, showing its teeth. It wasn't a snarl like a dog. This was more like a warning. I backed up faster. The truck slid a little on the packed snow. That scared me because losing control there would have been the end. It never chased me. It finally stopped and stood there and watched me back away until I put enough distance between us. Then it just kindly stepped off the road and went back off into the trees on the left side. I never saw it run. I never saw it drop down. It just simply walked out of sight. I sat there for several minutes before I could get my breathing under control. I didn't turn the truck around. I didn't get out. I drove straight back to the resort. That night, I couldn't stop replaying how close it was, how solid it looked, how little effort it took for it to close the distance. The next morning, I had to go back in daylight with another guy from maintenance. We did find weird tracks in the snow where it stood. They definitely weren't from a bear. They weren't wolf. They seemed to be something mixed in between. The stride was very wrong, too long, too straight. I left that job the following spring. It wasn't simply because of the encounter alone, but that was definitely part of it, I won't lie. I didn't like being alone out there anymore, and I still don't like the woods. To this day, I'll avoid back roads like that at dusk. If I see something standing in the road ahead, I'll slow down long before I get close to it. I don't need to be closer to figure things out anymore. I'm writing this to you because I've reached a point where not talking about this feels worse than being doubted. I don't care if people believe me or not. I know what stood in that road that night. Chris. Reels. Avid listener here. Love your channel. I'm not going to give my name. It's not necessary. It's not related to what happened at all. I'll never understand people that get upset because people use anonymous or some random name. Why do you care what the person's name is? It's not about them. It's about what they're trying to help you understand. Anyways, I'm 38 years old. This was 7 years ago. I feel like I should tell this because I'm tired of hearing people talk about things they've never stood in front of themselves. It's irritating. I did 8 years in the Marines, infantry, 2 deployments. I'm not a person who you can scare easily. And I don't confuse fear with caution. That distinction matters here. I was in western Washington, south of the Olympic Peninsula. I was in timber company land that borders state forest. I had permission to be there. I wasn't trespassing, I wasn't lost. It was in the late afternoon. Overcast that day, low clouds, typically wet and cold, and it gets into your bones if you know you know. Visibility was decent, but the trees break lines of sight constantly out there. I was hiking alone, moving between clear cuts, carrying a pack and a sidearm. I'd been in the area a dozen times before, beautiful area, never had issues. My attention was drawn to something, and it wasn't sound or smell. It was posture. I noticed something ahead of me standing on the edge of a slope overlooking the trail. At first, I thought it was a guy messing with me. That lasted until I got a bit closer and got a better look. This was not any type of human. This was 0% human. It was standing on 2 feet, completely bipedal. It was not standing in a way that looked forced or awkward. It stood like it should stand like that, like that's how it was meant to be. It had broad shoulders, thick through the torso, long arms hanging straight down. The legs were planted wide, like it was bracing itself. Its head was canine, no debate. Long muzzle, pointed ears, and they were slightly outward on the head. The eyes were dark. I saw no glow, no reflection, but they were fixed on me in a way that felt horrifying. The distance was 25 yards, max. I stopped walking. I didn't move away. I knew I was in trouble. I squared up without thinking. It was training, instinct. You don't turn your back on something that's assessing you, something you know is a threat to your safety. I raised my voice and told it to back away. That was a huge mistake. It expanded its chest and let out a deep, forceful sound. It was a mix between a large dog barking and growling, but it was more controlled, almost like it was pushing air out to show how big it was, how strong it was. I got the message. It began moving in my direction slowly. I felt anger hit me before fear. That surprised me. My hands tightened and I felt myself lean forward instead of back. I put my hand on my pistol, not drawing it yet, just letting it know that I wasn't backing down. I told it again to stop. It didn't. It just kept coming closer and turned its body slightly, angling its shoulders like it was preparing to move fast. That's when I drew my weapon. I didn't aim at its head. I aimed straight at the center of its chest. Training doesn't disappear just because what's in front of you shouldn't exist. I didn't shoot. It wasn't because I was scared or I froze up. It's because something changed in it. It reacted to the draw immediately. Its posture shifted. Its head dipped. Shoulders came forward. Showed me those beautiful teeth and that smile fully. It took 2 fast steps toward me and stopped hard, sliding on the ground. It was close enough that I could see scars in its fur across its chest. Old ones, too. That's when it clicked in my head. This thing wasn't afraid of me at all. My voice, or the weapon. It was challenging me. I took a step back, trying to put distance between us. It matched it instantly. That ended it for me. I knew something had to happen here. I broke eye contact and moved sideways downhill, slow but trying to go as fast as I could. I didn't dare run. That would have been a dumb mistake. I didn't apologize either, but I didn't speak again. It followed me parallel for several seconds, keeping the same distance, making sure I was not advancing. Then it just stopped. I kept going until the terrain dipped and the trees blocked the line of sight. I didn't hear it anymore. I didn't hear it pursue. I didn't hear anything. And I did not go back. I sat in the truck afterward for a long time. I hadn't felt this way since my first firefight overseas. That pissed me off more than anything. I didn't report what I seen. I didn't tell any of my friends. I didn't post anything online. I went back to the area one time a few months later. I had 2 other guys with me. Nothing happened, but the feeling I had was still there. The fear alone doesn't bother me. It's the respect. That thing didn't run because I stood my ground. It didn't attack because it didn't need to. It controlled that situation from start to finish. That bothers me a lot. And I know there's going to be people saying, you should have shot, you should have done this, you should have done that. I'd like to see what you would do, being in my position out there. I still hike. I still carry. But I don't assume dominance anymore. And I don't raise my voice in places where I'm not sure I belong. I'm not pretending that strength alone solves everything. That's a lie. Sometimes survival isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about knowing when you've been measured and found wanting. That's it, Reels. And always remember, in the words of Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. God bless. Anonymous. Real adventures. I didn't really think about or take my encounter with a dog man seriously again until about 5 years ago. I want to be clear about something immediately. I did not know or believe in Dogman. I didn't believe in Bigfoot or anything like it. I still don't consider myself someone who's into this stuff. I do listen out of curiosity and trying to learn all I can about what I saw. That's part of why I never talked about what happened. I know how people that are into this get treated by others and skeptics. Anyway, this was in eastern Oregon, near the edge of the Blue Mountains. I was working a seasonal job at the time and living cheap. I spent a lot of time alone outdoors because it was free and familiar. I grew up hunting and fishing. Being alone outside never bothered me. I actually preferred it most of the time. There was still plenty of light left that day. It was late summer, by the way. I was walking an old spur road that had grown over. Grass in the center, trees closing in on both sides. I remember checking my watch because I wanted to be back before dark. I saw something step onto the road ahead of me. At first I thought it was a ranch dog. This thing was big, but not unusual for the area. That is, until this big ranch dog stood up. I knew then that it was something that I was unfamiliar with, something that should not be standing in front of me. I remember actually stopping and squinting like my eyes were just not seeing it. It didn't even try to hide. It wasn't seeming to care if I could see it. This thing stood there, tall, chest wide, proud. The body didn't look right. Even though it was proportioned like a human, all but the head, it still did not look completely human, if that makes sense. The front arms or front legs, whatever, they were too long. They were not skinny, mind you, but they were extremely long. The length was mostly between the elbow and the wrist. That section of the arm was ridiculously long. The shoulders sat higher than they should have. The head was shaped like a dog's, but not like any dog I've ever seen. It was long through the face, and it had pointed ears. It was probably 40 or 50 yards away. I didn't feel terror. I felt confused, and that's important for later. My thoughts immediately started trying to explain it away. Costume, someone pranking me, a bear standing at a weird angle. I stood there longer than I should have because I was trying to make it make sense. While I was fighting, trying to make it make sense is when I should have been trying to get out of there. I watched its head turn slightly and very slowly, and it looked directly at me. That's when I felt a strong urge to leave. Just the certainty that standing there was going to be a bad idea. I stepped off the road and moved into the brush, putting trees between us. I kept walking without running. I didn't hear it following me. I didn't hear it leave. I didn't hear anything. I don't know if it just stood there and let me go or if it left and I just didn't hear it. Hell, it could have followed me for all I know. I got to my truck without anything else happening. Praise God for that. I told myself for years that it was a bear. Every detail that didn't fit, I ignored. The head shape, the arms, the way it stood. I filed it under strange but explainable, and I just moved on. I didn't have nightmares. I didn't change my behavior. I didn't warn anyone. That's how little I wanted it to mean something. Everything changed about 5 or 6 years ago. I started hearing people talk publicly about encounters with these creatures. Podcasts, interviews, written accounts. I wasn't looking for them, they just started showing up everywhere. It bothered me. It was the descriptions more than the claims themselves. The way people described the posture, the proportions, the head, the movement, where their brain tried to force it into something normal and it failed. It sounded all too familiar. I'd hear a detail and feel my stomach drop because it lined up with something I remembered but had buried. I went back through my memory carefully, without trying to excuse it this time. That's when I realized I'd never actually believed my own explanation. Now, I don't panic when I think about it. I don't feel hunted. I don't feel watched, still today. What I do feel is unsettled, because if it was real, and I think now that it was, then I encountered something I didn't understand and dismissed it. I went on with my life while it stayed exactly where it was. I'm not afraid to go outside. I'm not scared to hike. But I pay a lot more attention, and I look at things differently now when I'm outdoors. I feel like it's important to write this because denial is not peace. It's just delay. Hearing other people describe the same thing I saw finally forced me to stop lying to myself. I don't know what it was. I don't know what dogmen I don't know what dogmen are. But when I end this, I'm just going to say what most people always say. I find it funny. Not in a comical way, but kind of people try to put this on paper and explain it away in the most simple way possible. I don't know what it was, but I know it wasn't a bear. People, if you see this thing, you know it's not a bear. It looks nothing like a bear. Leave the poor bears alone. They get enough. Thanks. Reels. I've tried before to tell this to multiple people, and I'm not very good at it. So I'm just going to say it straight as I can. I stayed quiet when I shouldn't have, and I know people got hurt because of it. Maybe a few got killed, as far as I know, but definitely people were put in danger, and that sits on me every single day of my life. Just for time references, I'm in my early 50s now. My encounter was back when I was in my late 30s. At the time, I was working long hours and hiking early mornings before work to clear my head. I live in a rural area in the Midwest. It's not remote wilderness, but a lot of state land. A bunch of old logging roads, creek bottoms, that kind of thing. It's plenty of area where plenty of people use it. There's a lot of hikers, hunters, tons of kids go fishing in the summer in this area. And knowing what's out there, this makes it so much worse. It happened in early spring just before things really greened up. I was out before sunrise, maybe an hour or so before first light. I'd parked at a pull-off and walked in along an old trail that runs parallel to a creek. I had walked that same stretch plenty of times. I knew the sounds out there. I knew what belonged and what did not. I could have walked that trail blindfolded. About 20 minutes into my walk, I started noticing how quiet it was getting. It wasn't peaceful either. It was an uneasy, empty quiet. I heard no birds, no frogs down by the water, even the wind through the trees just felt different. Like it was moving above me and not around me, like I was inside of a pressurized bubble. Shortly after I noticed this is when I started hearing movement off to my right side. It was a steady movement that was keeping pace with me. At first I assumed it was a deer. Then I assumed it was a bear. But it didn't move like either one. The spacing between steps was off. It was too wide. It wasn't circling, it was paralleling me. I stopped walking. It stopped as well. That's when I was completely engulfed in that pressure. The pressure you get when something or someone is watching you. It was a very strong awareness that was snapping into place. I slowly started looking, scanning the trees. I saw it standing between two big tree trunks, maybe 40 yards out. It was standing up. It wasn't leaning on a tree. It wasn't bracing itself to stand. It wasn't hunched. This thing was standing straight, fully upright. It was bigger than any person I've ever seen in real life. It had very thick, broad shoulders and a wide chest. It was covered in dark fur, but it was not shaggy. It was more matted, almost like it had been wet recently. Its head was the shape of a canine, wolf or dog, either you pick, it doesn't matter. There was no question about that. I saw it, very clearly. It had a long muzzle. I saw the ears standing upright and slightly forward. I did notice the eyes, and they were a dull yellow color. I don't think they were glowing. If they were, I didn't notice. What I did notice is how human the eyes looked, how much intelligence that I could feel from looking at them. I know that sounds crazy, but you would just have to be in this scenario to understand the feelings you get. It never showed any signs of wanting to come after me. It didn't move at all, really. It just watched me. I stood there just staring in awe, way longer than I should have stood. My mind and brain kept scrambling, trying to turn it into something else, anything that made sense. This was someone in a costume, but why would they be out here at this time? And why would they do this anyway? This is nuts. There's no way. I'm being tricked by some sort of misidentification of another animal. No, this is not a sick bear. No, I couldn't accept any of these explanations because they just didn't fit. None of them held up. It finally moved a bit, and I could see how tall and how big it really was. It's well over 7 feet, and its chest and hips were really heavy and thick. That's when I backed away. I didn't turn my back, I didn't scream, I just started walking slowly backward, trying to keep my eyes on it, all while not trying to trip and kill myself. It followed me. It never got closer, it just matched my movements, but it always stayed in the trees, never coming in the open. Everything, every instinct I had, told me, you better not run. I kept backing up until the trail curved and the creek came back into view. When I reached that open area, I risked a glance back. It was gone. I walked all the way back to my truck without stopping. I didn't jog, I didn't run, I just kept moving. I didn't tell a soul, and that's the part that matters here. I told myself there was no proof. I told myself I'd be laughed at. I told myself I didn't want to be that person. I convinced myself that since it hadn't attacked me, it wasn't a real threat. I kept hiking there after that, just at different times, later in the morning, never before sunrise again. Over the next few years, there were things I brushed off that I shouldn't have. A hiker went missing overnight and was found miles off the trail the next day. They were alive, but shaken and dehydrated, saying something chased them. Everyone laughed it off as just panic. They were just glad the person was alive, which I understand, but something happened to this individual. The kids stopped fishing in the creek because the way they described it, something big scared them. A big wolf. Parents just chalked it up to imagination, just a normal animal that scared the kids. Nothing unusual. I know better. A dog was found torn up into pieces near a campsite. Everyone blamed coyotes even though it didn't look like that. Coyotes can't do that kind of damage. From what I heard, and I don't like being graphic, but I like to get my point across. From what I heard, the dog looked similar to something that had been run through a wood chipper. Now, every time I thought about that morning, and every time I stayed quiet when I would hear these stories, as people call them. It wasn't until years later, after I started hearing other people talk publicly about encounters, grown adults, hunters, hikers, people with nothing to gain, that it hit me how close those descriptions were to what I saw. Same posture, same size, same way of watching instead of charging. That's when the guilt set in. I realized I hadn't protected anyone by staying silent, not even myself. I had done the opposite, actually. I let people walk into an area I knew wasn't safe because I didn't want to deal with the fallout of speaking up. Very selfish, indeed. I don't go out there in that area anymore. I don't hike alone at all now, actually. I'm not afraid it will attack me, but because I don't trust myself to handle seeing it again. I don't want to carry this alone anymore, and I don't want to pretend that staying quiet was the responsible thing to do. If anyone hears this and thinks twice about where they go, or when they go, then maybe that balances the scale just a little. I can't change what I didn't say back then. I can only change what I say now. and how I warn people. Please understand. If you hear someone tell you that they saw something unusual in an area, please believe them. What does it cost you to take caution? Nothing. Only your safety is in question. Thank you, Reels. You're doing good deeds. Anonymous. Reels. It's good to speak with you. I'm glad that I heard back from you. For a long time, I refused to call what I saw anything other than a mistake on my part. I'm not someone who will jump to conclusions, and I've always leaned hard toward logic and evidence. That mindset carried me through most of my life without issues. That is, until what we're going to speak of now. I was in my early 30s. I'm a civil engineer by trade. Measurements, repeatability, and eliminating variables is how my brain works. I don't believe in things because they feel real. I believe them when they hold up under pressure. This did not. I was driving home late from a site inspection. Rural highway, 2-lane, nothing but fields on both sides and long stretches without lighting. It was early winter. There was no snow yet, but the ground was hard and the air had that sharp, cut edge to it. I was doing about 55 when something crossed the road ahead of me. It didn't go fast, it didn't dart. It just crossed, casually. I slowed down immediately, expecting to see a deer jump the ditch. But what stepped into my headlights made that expectation fall apart. This was something standing like humans do. I don't mean standing up for a second, I mean moving on 2 legs with balance and intent. It crossed from left to right at an angle, and for a brief moment it was fully illuminated by my headlights. I had time to register proportions, not just shape. The legs were too long, the stride was wrong for a human. The upper body was heavy, thick, through the shoulders and chest. The arms swung, but not loosely like a man's, they were more controlled. The head was that of a canine, long muzzle, forward-facing eyes, ears pointed and upright. The neck set low into the shoulders instead of rising like a human's. I braked to a complete stop. This thing stopped, too, at the edge of the road just before the ditch. We were no more than 20 feet apart. It turned its head toward me and looked directly at the cab of my truck. This was not a costume or a prank. I could see its eyes moving. I could see it blinking. I could see it breathing. I could see its nose twitching. This is a living, breathing animal. No matter whether you want to believe or not. They're real. I saw no aggression in its posture, no threat displayed, no curiosity either. It was assessing the situation the same as me, the same way an animal decides whether something matters. Is it a threat? Should I attack? Should I run? Then it stepped down into the ditch and just disappeared from my sight. I sat there, engine running, hands on the wheel trying to reconstruct what I'd seen in a way that could make sense to me. The best logical explanation I could come up with was it had to be a bear with mange. If you've never seen a bear with mange, I tell you now, don't Google it, or do. That's up to you, and you'll understand why I came to this conclusion. Then I did tell myself after, it could have been a person in a costume, but again, I saw the eyes moving, blinking, twitching, breathing. No way could a costume do this. I told myself my depth perception had failed and I'd misjudged everything. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself I'd solved it. Over the next few years, though, something just kept bothering me. Every explanation I'd settled on fell apart when I thought about it, the way it moved, about the balance, about how fluid it had been. about how natural it had occupied that space. I never mentioned this to anyone, not once. Saying it out loud felt ridiculous. It wasn't until much later, almost a decade later, that I started hearing people describe encounters publicly. Not internet thrill seekers, not kids. These were adults with careers, families, things to lose. And they kept describing the same creature, the same details. The posture, the proportions, the way it moved without urgency. These are reputable, credible people that could lose everything. Why would they tell a lie about something like this? I know I'm not. That's when all the certainty I had built around myself collapsed. I realized I hadn't been applying skepticism evenly. I had been skeptical of the event itself, but not of my own need to dismiss it. I had seen something that didn't fit, and instead of adjusting my understanding, I'd forced the memory to fit my understanding. That realization hit harder than the encounter did. I don't talk about this in my daily life. I still work the same career. I still function. But I don't dismiss people the way I used to. Not when they say they saw something that doesn't line up neatly. I don't know what that thing was or what they are, but I know it wasn't a mistake. And admitting that took many years for me to come to terms with it. Reels, you're a good dude. I really appreciate what you do for these people, and myself included. God bless you, brother. Anonymous. Hello, Reels. Now, to be clear, this wasn't my encounter originally. It was my brother's. That's part of why it took me so long to accept it. He was always the outdoors guy between the two of us. Hunting, fishing, camping, all of it. I wasn't. I liked order, schedules, predictable environments. I teased him for believing weird stuff sometimes, and he teased me for being indoorsy only. This happened about 12 years ago in northern Minnesota near the edge of some public lands not far from the Canadian border. He was in his mid-20s then. I was a couple years older. He called me late one night and sounded weird. Not drunk, not panicked, he just didn't sound like himself. He said he'd seen something while checking trail cameras near dusk. Something upright, big, watching him from the trees. He said it followed him out without trying to rush or show aggression, but he was very uneasy. I laughed it off. Told him it was probably a bear. They can stand up a little bit sometimes, and it's nothing abnormal. I told him exhaustion messes with perception. Maybe he was tired. He didn't argue with me, and that bothered me more than if he had. Over the next few months, he stopped going out alone. Then he stopped going out at all. Sold most of his gear. Gained a ton of weight. Began getting quiet and detached. We didn't talk about it again. 3 years later, he disappeared. I don't mean vanished forever, I mean he went missing for a night. He was supposed to be home by dark. He wasn't. His phone went straight to voicemail. His truck was found the next morning parked crooked near a gravel access road. The driver's door was open. Search crews went out. Dogs, helicopters, the whole thing. We feared for the worst. They found him late the next afternoon, miles from where the truck was. He was sitting against a fallen tree like he'd just given up and stopped walking. He had scratches on his arms and face, nothing deep or serious. His clothes were not torn. There was no blood. Nothing that made sense in this whole situation. When I asked him what happened, he just wouldn't answer. Weeks later, he finally told me this. He said he had gone back out because he was tired of feeling scared, tired of adjusting his life around something he wasn't even sure was real. He said he needed to prove to himself that he'd imagined all of it. He hadn't imagined it. This time he said it got close enough that he could smell it, close enough that he could see the eyes clearly. He said it moved around him without making sound, like it knew exactly where he was at all times. He said he tried to stand his ground. That didn't work. He wouldn't describe everything, just said that when it finally left him alone, he felt emptied out, like something had pressed him down and decided he wasn't worth finishing. It was going to leave him to suffer. I wanted to argue. I wanted to correct him. I wanted to fix it with logic. Instead, I just listened. That was the first crack. Years passed. I began hearing other people talk, hearing interviews, call-ins, regular folks, different places all over the world. Same pattern. I recognized things before they said them. That's when the denial stopped being honest. I realized something else as well. If I'd taken him seriously the first time, he might not have gone back. If I hadn't laughed, he might have talked more, asked for help, slowed down. I didn't cause what happened to him, but I didn't prevent it either, and I may have been able to. He's still alive. He works a normal job now, has a family, but there are parts of him that never came back. You can see it in how he watches tree lines, in how he reacts to certain sounds, and how he avoids being alone outside. I don't know what dogmen are, but I know one thing for sure, that if you're dismissing people, that doesn't make them safer. It just makes them grow quiet and distant. That's why I'm going to do this. That's why I wanted to tell this here. I don't want attention. I don't want to be part of the reason someone else walks back into something that they shouldn't.
Reels. My name is redacted. Don't use it. You can call me C if something is really needed here. I'm in my 30s. This happened over half a lifetime ago for me. I was 15. My dad is gone now. He passed a few years back, and I'm not gonna lie. Part of why I'm writing this is because he took this whole thing to the grave with him. We never talked about it openly. Not the way people think we did. It just sat there between us. Me and him were broke when I was growing up. Actually broke. Not, oh, we didn't have the newest stuff. I mean, we kept the heat low and made our food stretch as far as possible. My dad did whatever work he could find, and when that wasn't enough, we would trap and hunt coyotes. Whatever we could legally sell. We'd flesh them out, salt them, stretch them, and take them in. Some years it was the only cash we had besides his job. I'm not comfortable giving locations. I can't really help if it offends or makes anyone upset. This is my encounter and my choice. We lived on mostly farmland. There was a lot of field edges and a little wood lots. We had a neighbor who owned a big chunk of land, and he knew all about our situation. He was one of those older farm guys that didn't talk much, but he wasn't cold-hearted either. He told my dad we could trap the edges and hunt coyote back there as long as we shut the gates and didn't tear anything up. He also quietly told him once, if you see a deer and you guys need the meat, take one. It's not a problem. It didn't happen all the time now. Don't get upset. It's not like we were out there blasting everything that moved. Just once in a while, when things got bad for us and we were struggling, we would take what we needed. That's it. That's the kind of dad I had. He wasn't proud. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just trying to keep food on the table and clothes on our backs. Now, I can't give you an exact date for all of this, but I do know it was in the late fall because I remember how cold it was out. We were out after dark, walking the edge where the woods met a cut cornfield. We had a couple sets we'd check, and then we'd do some calling for coyotes. This was all normal for us. We came into something, and it stopped us both. We were confused. At first I thought it was a dump pile, like someone had dumped carcasses or roadkill or something. But when we got closer, I realized it was deer. Multiple deer, not one. It wasn't like a normal kill site where something's been eaten and dragged. This was a complete mess. Heads separated, legs removed, open torsos, guts in the leaves everywhere. It looked like someone had taken deer apart and thrown the pieces around. Here, I'll tell you something that made my stomach completely start flip-flopping. Nothing was eaten. Nothing was being eaten. There was no clean bites, no, this is what coyotes do. No, this is what a bear does. It wasn't feeding. It was like it just destroyed them for sport or for fun and moved on. My dad crouched down and he got really quiet. I don't know if he was scared or not, but I was. He seemed to have more of a think way about him. He took his light and checked around the whole area slowly, while not saying a word. He finally spoke up and said something like, "This is fresh." We both knew it was. The smell was strong. You could smell the blood. It wasn't that old. It was definitely a recent kill site. My dad did what he always did. He started looking for tracks. I was young and dumb enough to be excited. I wasn't scared at this point. Not completely. I was more nervous than scared. My brain was going, oh, we're going to get us a big coyote. Like this was some prize. We found tracks leaving the area, and right away I remember thinking how odd they looked. They were much bigger than a dog, but still had the pads and tracks like a dog. The only weird part was behind the pads was this long, skinny portion that looked like a very narrow human foot with a heel. The toes looked long, too. The spacing was very strange. But at 15, I didn't have words for that. I just knew it didn't match what we trapped, anything we knew. I'd never seen tracks like this, and I don't think he had either. He didn't say dog man. He didn't say anything like that. He wasn't into cryptids, and we never really knew about that. We knew about Bigfoot like everyone else, but we never believed it. We spent enough time outdoors. If that thing was real, we would have had an encounter by now. That's how naive we were. If anything, he would have laughed at all of this if someone would have said some weird walking wolf creature. That's ridiculous. I can hear it now. All he said to me was, "Stay close." We followed those tracks into the woods. The deeper we went, the more the whole place felt off. It wasn't like a spooky movie. It was just like the woods weren't acting like the woods. It didn't feel like the woods. I felt like we were fish in an aquarium and we were surrounded by people staring at us, watching us move. We started seeing other animals move through the trees like they were trying to get away from something. They weren't sneaking past us, they were running. These things were leaving the area. A deer came through fast and close. It didn't even do that deer thing where they stop and stare at you. It just ran. Then another one. A few foxes cutting through the brush like it didn't care who saw it, like it wasn't afraid of us at all. Our presence made no difference. Then I saw a coyote, and I swear on everything I love, it was moving like it wanted nothing to do with that area. Coyotes do not act like that. They're nosy, curious by nature. They'll hang around. This one was out of there, was gone. My dad noticed all this too because he stopped and looked at me. "You seeing this?" He didn't have to say it. I could see it on his face. He was just as surprised, if not more, than me. We kept going, and it got worse. There was no normal night sounds at this point. There was no little movements in the leaves, just our steps alone and the occasional snap somewhere off in the dark that would make my dad stop and listen. After a few minutes of walking, we started smelling something strange. I know people talk about smells in these stories and it sounds cheesy, but I'm telling you, that smell was real and it hit us before we saw anything. It wasn't just a dead animal smell. It had this sour, burning edge to it. It was like rot and something chemical mixed together. Not gas, not skunk, something else. My dad actually covered his nose with his sleeve, that's how bad it was. We came to this area where the ground rose up, like a big mound. There was dirt piled up and packed with sticks and brush kind of woven in. It didn't look like a normal den. It looked like something had been pushing dirt up for a long time, building it up. This thing was massive. All around this mound were bones, and they weren't no neat piles. They were just scattered everywhere. Some looked old, and some looked newer. My dad just immediately stopped and whispered, "Back up," and he said it very low. That was the first time I heard his voice change, and that's when I knew we were in danger. I was staring at the mound because my eyes were adjusting and I could see there was like an opening on one side, darker than the rest, and the smell was pouring out of it. Something moved on the other side of that mound, not in the hole, outside. We both turned our lights. I saw it for a second, in pieces. It's like all these still frame images just flash in a fast sequence. This thing was low to the ground when I first noticed it. It was like on all fours. It was black. It was big. As soon as I noticed it, within seconds, it noticed us as well, and immediately stood up on its hind legs. When it stood up, my whole body did that cold drop thing where your stomach turns and your hands go numb. This wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a big dog. It definitely was not anything like a man. It was shaped like a wolf in the head, no question. Long front to the face. The ears were up and the mouth looked too wide when it opened it. But the body was upright. Its shoulders were thick and high. Its arms were hanging down sort of like a person's arms, but they were a lot longer. The forearms were extremely long. It was the strangest looking thing that you could imagine. The chest on it was thick, and I don't mean fat. This thing had some muscle to it. My dad raised his rifle fast. He had a 30-06. The thing did not run. He carried the bigger caliber for just-in-case situations. All I had was a .22 long rifle for the coyotes. This thing had zero craps to give, and that terrified me. We hit it with lights. We lit it up like daytime, and he had it at gunpoint, and it still started coming forward. This wasn't a playful trot. It wasn't curiosity. It came forward like it owned the ground we were standing on, like we walked into its spot, and I suppose we did. I remember my dad screaming. It wasn't words like hey, but like a hard shout trying to push it back. But it just kept coming. He didn't want to fire, I could see it, but he had no choice, and he pulled the trigger. That first shot was loud as hell in the woods. The muzzle flash lit up the trees. I saw the hit because I saw the fur and skin jump in the upper chest area. I saw something dark spray out to the side. There wasn't a ton, but enough that there was no question he connected. This thing did not even flinch. It didn't even stumble the way a deer stumbles when it's hit. And I'm not sure who knows much about guns, but a 30-06 round is no joke. People take down grizzlies with this caliber. It snapped its head back and opened its mouth and made this sound that still gives me nightmares to this day. It was a howl. It sounded like a wolf howl, but deep down underneath the howl there was this raspy, crackling, growling sound that mixed in with it. It was like two animals vocalizing at the same time, but it was only coming from this one thing. Nothing should be able to make a noise like that. It felt like it hit my ribs. It lunged forward, 2 steps like it was going to close the distance. My dad fired again quick. The second shot hit lower, more center to the gut area. I saw it hit as well. That's when it finally turned. Not completely away from us, like it was running away. It turned sideways, like it was deciding whether to come in anyway. It did this weird thing where it dropped down for a second like it was going to go on all fours and charge. My dad turned and looked at me. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. All he said was, "Run, now." I ran. There was no time for questioning or arguing. I didn't look back right away. My dad was between me and it, and that's how he moved. Like pure instinct. We busted through the woods. We weren't quiet about it. We weren't tracking anymore. We were just trying to get distance and get away from whatever this is. I looked back once, eventually, and I saw it moving through the trees parallel with us. It wasn't chasing straight behind like a movie. It was off to the side, keeping pace. This thing was faster than I can describe. It was unnatural speed. My dad fired again, into the dark. I don't know if he hit it. I couldn't see. I just heard the shot, and then my dad grabbed my jacket and yanked me harder, like he was trying to pull my body through the woods. We hit the field edge and kept going. We didn't stop until we were back closer to the farm buildings where there were lights way off in the distance. We got to the truck, and my dad threw me in like I was a kid again. He took off. No talking. He was breathing hard, and his hands were locked tight on that steering wheel. I remember him saying one thing, very low, like he was talking to himself. He said it over and over a few times. That was no coyote. That's all he would say. We got home, and he made me swear I would not tell anyone what just happened. I thought he meant because it sounded crazy. Now I think he meant because he didn't want attention on us or on that land. After that, we never went back deep. We still trapped the edges later on, closer to where you could see fields. But those night hunts almost stopped altogether. My dad would make an excuse like it's not worth it or fuel costs too much right now. But I knew. And here's something else. A few days after that, our neighbor, the farmer, asked my dad real casual if we'd seen anything weird back there, like he was fishing. My dad told him no, just shook his head and said no. We never found out what happened to those deer. I can take a wild guess, but who knows? Maybe there was more than one. We never told the game warden. We never went looking for that mound again. My dad died a few years later, and we never talked about it straight out. Not once. It was like he didn't want to give it a name or speak words about it. I've got my own kids now, and when I think about how he put himself between me and that dogman thing, it messes me up. I keep thinking about that pile of deer and how nothing was eaten. That was not hunting. That was something else. These things are evil, in my opinion. I haven't seen any other behaviors. I've heard about people being helped or having spiritual type encounters. That is not what happened to us. Anyway, use this or don't use it. I just needed to get it out there and get it off my conscience. C. Reels. I think my encounter might be a bit hard for me to explain. I'm just going to tell you the way it happened and let it sit where it sits. I'm a man in my late 50s. This was around 10 years ago. Already had kids, already thought I understood how the world worked. That's part of why this has affected me so much and done the amount of damage that it has. This happened in Iron County, Wisconsin. The snow was still on the ground. It was late winter. It was starting to melt during the day and freeze again at night. The roads were pretty slick in a lot of places. I was driving home from a shift at work. I take the same route that I'd taken for years. It's a 2-lane county road, woods on both sides, and no houses for a stretch of a few miles. I hit a patch of ice on a slight curve and slid into the ditch. It wasn't a hard crash, just enough that the truck wouldn't get traction to climb back out. I shut the engine off and just sat there cussing, very annoyed for more than anything. Cell service was spotty out there back then. I tried anyway. I had no service. I grabbed my coat and got out to see how bad it was. The front end was down in the ditch, the back wheels still on the road. Well, one of the back wheels was off the ground completely. There was snow packed under the frame. That's when I realized how quiet it was out there. There was no traffic, no wind. There was nothing. I was standing by the driver's door when I started hearing footsteps in the snow behind me somewhere. I turned around, expecting to see maybe another car had stopped. I didn't hear it, or maybe a neighbor from one of the farms farther down the road had heard or seen me go in the ditch. I did not expect to see what I saw. A wolf standing on 2 legs was on the shoulder of the road about 50 feet back. It wasn't in the trees, it was right out in the open. Just standing there, as pretty as you please. This thing was probably 8 feet tall, if I had to guess. It was very thick and muscular through the shoulders and chest. It was covered in dark hair that looked sort of patchy in spots, like it had scars or had been burned. The hair was shaggy and thicker on the chest area and around the neck and shoulders. The legs, stomach, and arms were kind of thin and bald. You could see the skin, which was a gray, leathery texture. The head was a big dog's head. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should scream or pause or try to get in the truck. I just didn't know what to do. My entire body kind of stalled out. It looked at me, and then it looked at the truck. Then it did something I still can't reconcile. It walked toward the front of my truck. Just walked up to it like it knew exactly what it was doing, like it was thinking, like it was intelligent. I backed up without taking my eyes off of it until I felt the door against my leg. It bent down slightly and put its hands under the front bumper. Yes, this thing had hands and not paws. It lifted. I know how this sounds. I truly do. I know how much a truck weighs. I know what it takes to move one, stuck in the snow as bad as this one was. And I know people don't believe these things are real. The front end rose up, not all the way out of the ditch, but enough that the angle changed. It held it there for a few seconds. I couldn't move. I couldn't believe what was happening. This was like a nightmare.
Then it just set the truck back down and stepped away and looked at me again. It turned and walked into the woods on the right side of the road. I stood there for a while. I don't know how long it was. Time just kind of stopped. When I finally got back in the truck and tried again, it came out of the ditch with almost zero effort. I didn't stop to think about it. It was time to go, so I drove straight home. When I got home, my behavior was off. Abnormal, to say the least. My wife knew something was wrong, but all I told her was I slid off the road and some guy helped me. That's the lie that I stuck with for a long time. Years, actually. The fact that it understood the problem. It knew the truck was stuck. It knew how to lift it. It knew when to stop. And it didn't want anything from me in return. I've spent a lot of time since then trying to tell myself it was shock or exhaustion, or my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark. I remember the weight shift when it lifted the truck. I remember the sound of the snow that it made when the tires settled. I remember the way it looked at me like it was telling me, there, you can leave now. I don't, or I wouldn't stop on that road anymore if something happens. I wouldn't pull over for stranded vehicles at night either, as bad as that makes me sound. You don't understand what seeing this does, even if it's not angry or violent. I'm not really afraid of being attacked. It's because I don't want to see something like that again, and owe it an explanation that I don't have. I don't care, nice or not. This is the definition of a monster, and I don't want to ever see it again. Thank you, Reels. You're a godsend, brother. R. Reels. I'm a retired deputy, and I won't give my name or I won't give my department. That's for obvious reasons, I'm sure. I'm telling you this now, and I feel a bit safe about it because I don't wear the badge anymore, and I don't feel like this is some kind of personal failure. This was almost 30 years ago, as I was in my late 20s at the time. I was working nights then, rural county, mostly domestic calls, deer strikes, and the occasional drunk wandering down the road or trying to drive. This is where you learn every back road and every trouble spot within your first year. It's always, usually, the same areas that give problems. This happened in Lewis County, Missouri. I will say that. It was on a gravel road that runs along a creek. There's no houses right there, just a lot of timber and floodplain. Dispatch put the call out as a livestock complaint. The neighbor reported hearing animals screaming, thought maybe someone was butchering illegally or dogs were attacking something. It was after midnight. There was no backup available nearby, so I went alone. When I got there, my headlights lit up the edge of a field and the tree line behind it. I shut the engine off and just sat there listening. I could smell it immediately. I've worked car wrecks. I've worked decomps. I've worked farm accidents. This wasn't anything like any of those. It smelled sharp and sour at the same time, like blood that had gone bad mixed with something else. I got a flashlight and decided to step out of the car. A few yards off the road near the creek, there were remains of cattle. Not one, more than one. I could tell by the size of the bones there were parts scattered everywhere. They hadn't been dragged far. There was no obvious feeding pattern. It was just pure destruction. That alone should have had me calling for wildlife officers, or at the least, getting back in my car and leaving until I had help. What stopped me were the tracks. They were pressed down deep
impressions into the mud near the creek bank. This was the biggest damn tracks I've ever seen in my life. They were longer than my boot, and I wear a size 12. The spacing didn't make sense for a bear, and bears weren't common there anyway. I remember kneeling down and thinking, what the hell made these? As soon as that thought hit, I heard quick movement behind me, heavy movement. It was something moving around in the trees. I stood up very slowly and turned my head. At first I only saw a shape in the trees. It was so big it nearly looked like one of the tree trunks itself. This thing was dark. It was very tall, and it was standing upright, so I knew instantly this wasn't an animal. My light hit it, and I saw dark fur and a head that looked like a giant wolf. It stepped out enough that I could see it more clearly. Like I said, it was standing on its back legs, very broad shoulders. This thing looked like some type of bodybuilder. The legs bent backward below the knee like a dog's would. The head was, like I said, canine, long snout. It just stood there and watched me like it was about to attack, or that's how I felt. That was the vibe that I was getting. I already had my service weapon out without even remember drawing it. I was aiming directly at it because training does that to you. But nothing in my training covered what I was looking at. I remember thinking to myself, if I actually fire, I have no idea what will happen next. The distance between us wasn't far, maybe 20 yards at this point. It started moving, not directly forward. It was kind of circling off to my left, like it was about to challenge me to a duel or something. I can't explain it. It's strange. Even now, trying to write this out, it's very odd for me. I don't know why I even yelled this, but I told it to stop like it was a normal person I was about to make an arrest on. But this wasn't a person, and that's what came out of my mouth. It did stop when I yelled, like it understood. We stood there for a few seconds. My arms were starting to shake. It was from adrenaline dumping too hard, I assume. It turned its head slightly like it was listening to something behind it that I couldn't hear. It stepped backwards a few times, and then it just turned sideways and took off running into the trees along the creek, completely upright. I never saw it drop to all fours, not once. I was not about to pursue this thing. There's no way. I went quickly back to my cruiser and I called in that I'd found evidence of a livestock kill and that I was clearing the scene. I didn't mention the creature, the tracks. I didn't mention anything about what I just saw. The report I wrote up later was vague. Probable wildlife damage. No follow-up recommended. A supervisor asked me the next day why I hadn't called for backup. I told him there was nothing active when I arrived. That was true, just not the whole truth. I went back to that area once during daylight with another deputy about a week later. I couldn't rest. I needed some kind of proof. Not for anyone that I tell this to, but mainly for myself. The remains were gone. The tracks were washed out from the creek, being flooded a bit. There was nothing to document. Being as I'm retired, I would guess you would know I did keep my job and stay there years after that. Now, over the years, I handled a lot of bad calls. I drew my weapon a lot of times, but I never felt as uncertain as I did that night standing on that creek bank. Whatever these things are, Reels, they're not confused. They are highly intelligent and extremely dangerous. It knew I was there. It knew what I was. And the most important thing, it made the decision to let me leave alive. That's all I'm willing to say. That's really all there is to say. Anonymous. Hello, Reels. About my encounter. I'm angry about how it was handled, even years after. I'm not even scared about it anymore. I'm just angry. I was in Spartanburg County, South Carolina. It was about 8 years ago. I was in my early 40s back then. I was working at a warehouse and picking up side work at night doing equipment repairs on farms. I spent a lot of time driving a lot of back roads after dark. That night was not unusual or out of the ordinary, until it was. I was heading home just after 11 p.m., and this road cuts through fields and woods. There's obviously no street lights. I'd driven it 1,000 times. I came around a bend and saw something standing in the road about 60 yards ahead of me. At the time, it was far enough away that I could barely see the silhouette of something standing there, so I had no idea what was up ahead. I slowed down. I thought it was a big dog or maybe a calf had gotten loose from a farm. That thought did not last more than a second. It turned toward my headlights immediately. It was standing there in the road, upright, like a person. There was no rearing, no hopping. This thing was standing. 2 legs firmly planted on the pavement. Its shoulders were over the roof of my truck. Its chest was as broad as the hood, and it had these long arms hanging down way beyond its waist. Its legs were bent backward below the knee. They were not straight like a man's, and I could see that it had a large, bushy tail. The head was a dog's head. It was black in color, covered in fur, thick, really thick fur, almost shaggy. It stood there and took a few steps toward the shoulder of the road like it was about to cross or let me pass. I stopped the truck. We were close enough that I could see its body clearly in the headlights. The fur was definitely almost black. I could tell now that it was thick around the shoulders and the arms, kind of thinner across the chest. I could see literal muscle moving under the fur when it moved. This wasn't a dog, a bear. This wasn't anything normal. I knew that immediately. I think I was in shock, or very close. I leaned forward over the steering wheel, and it turned its head and we made eye contact. That look pissed me off more than it scared me for some reason. It wasn't because it was an aggressive or angry look. It's because it was calm. Like I was interrupting something, like I was just a house cat. No threat, just something small and insignificant. It stepped off the road and walked off into the trees on 2 legs. It was in no hurry, just walked in and disappeared. I sat there for about 10 seconds. Then I grabbed my phone and called 911. I wasn't whispering. I wasn't panicking. I told them exactly what had just happened and what I saw. I said there's something standing upright in the road that looks like a dog, but it's not a dog. The dispatcher asked if it was still there. I told her it had gone into the woods. She asked if it was threatening me. I said no, but that didn't make it less real. A deputy showed up about 20 minutes later. I walked him to the spot, showed him where it had crossed.
The brush was all pressed down. The ground was torn up where it stepped off the road. You could clearly see it. He looked for about 5 minutes and then said, "Yeah, probably just a big dog, or you saw a bear stand up." I told him there's no way. I told him exactly how this thing moved. I told him how tall it was. I told him it walked away, upright. Bears cannot walk like that. And again, they're not that common here. It's highly unlikely. He just shrugged me off and said animals do weird things sometimes. That's when I got really mad. I wasn't yelling mad, I just was tight-jaw mad. I told this man I wasn't drunk. I told this man I wasn't confused. I argued with him, told him I'd lived there my whole life and I wasn't an idiot. I wasn't blind. I know the difference between a bear and a damn werewolf. I know it sounded crazy, but he should have been able to tell by my seriousness that I was not playing around. He wrote something down pretending to care. He handed me a card. This guy was useless. He told me to call again if it comes back. That was it. No report that I could see. No follow-up, no wildlife officer, no questions at all. I know they thought I was crazy. I just drove home. I realized how fast something real gets turned into nothing just because it doesn't fit a box. I avoided that road for months. I didn't think it would jump me. I just didn't want to see it again and be told that I imagined it all. It's ridiculous. I know what I saw. I don't need anyone to validate it for me. But I also know now that if something like that ever hurts someone out there, the first reports are going to get brushed off the same way mine did. Bear attack, of course. That is what still makes me angry. Anyway, thanks for letting me say all of this out loud. Name withheld. Hey, bud. I got one for you. This happened in Union County, Ohio, about 10 years ago. I was around 30. I'd gotten onto metal detecting as a side hobby after work. I would go to old farm fields, permission-based properties, stuff like that. Quiet, legal, boring, in a good way. It was late evening and early fall. Still light enough to see clearly, but the sun was getting lower. I was on a piece of private land I had written permission for. It was an old pasture that backed up to a strip of woods. I'd hunted relics there a dozen times before. I was working slow along the tree line when the detector gave a deep tone. It wasn't trash, not iron. This was something solid. I went down, dug a plug, and pulled out an old rusted hinge. It wasn't anything special to brag about, so I stood up, swung again, and that's when I realized the woods had gotten extremely quiet all of a sudden. The place just felt completely empty. I straightened up and looked at the trees. Sure enough, it didn't take me long to spot something out of place. This creature was standing inside the tree line. That's the only word I know to describe it is creature. We have no words for this. It was no more than 25 to 30 feet away from me. It wasn't crouched like I hear some other people. This was immediately standing upright. Standing like it was just standing there watching me or spectating, seeing what I would find. This thing was tall enough that its shoulders were level with the lower branches, which the branches were a good 7 feet. It had dark fur, I would say almost black. It looked to be very thick and also well maintained. This thing was shiny. I would nearly say it was beautiful had it not been for the amount of terror I was feeling. The legs were not bent backward below the knee like others. This one fits the werewolf category, or so I've been told. It had no tail, and the body was exactly like a large man, but the head was like a dog's head. It had a short snout, but the ears were pointed up like a German shepherd. I did not make no mistakes identifying it. I saw what I saw, clearly. We were close enough that I could see its ears twitching. I could see the muscles shifting under the fur as it adjusted. The metal detector was still humming lightly in my hand. I turned it off without thinking, like you would if you didn't want to bother someone. That's when it made its first movement. It took one step toward me. I raised my hands a little, palms out, without really meaning to. The only thing going through my head was that I was responsible for being there and not escalating whatever this was. It tilted its head to one side, not seeming to be aggressive at all, just aware. It did something now I've heard before, but didn't really know if I believed it until I saw it myself. This thing smiled at me, as clear as day, and then just walked off into the trees. I stood there for a while. Then I just packed my gear and left. What else could I do? I thought about calling the cops or telling someone, but I didn't tell anyone, not that night. The problem came later. A week or two after that, the landowner called me and asked why I'd been out there again after dark. I told him I hadn't gone back, especially at nighttime. That was something he had set a rule about. There's no need to go at night. Who wants to do that? You don't metal detect in the night. He said a neighbor had complained about someone lurking around the woods and mentioned an animal they couldn't identify. My permission was revoked. He didn't accuse me directly, but it was clear he did not believe me. Not long after that, my wife found my metal detector in the garage and asked why I hadn't gone out in a while. I told her the truth. She didn't laugh. She just said she didn't want me out there alone anymore. She believed me. That was pretty much the end of it. I sold my metal detecting equipment. I stopped asking for permissions. I stopped going out at all. It wasn't fear that made the decision, it was responsibility. I had a family. I didn't need to be putting myself in situations I couldn't explain or control. I know what I saw. I know they are real. I also know how quickly something like that turns into a problem for everyone around you, even if nothing happens at the moment. And that is why I walked away. Thanks for reading. Name withheld. Reels. Before I say anything here, I want to make it clear that I wasn't confused about what I saw. Not at all. I was an animal control officer for almost 12 years. I know dogs. I know coyotes. I know what livestock damage looks like when it's predators, illness, or people being cruel and careless. This wasn't any of those. This encounter took place in Madison County, Indiana, during my last few years on the job. We were getting repeating calls from two neighboring farms about livestock being found dead and mutilated. They were not eaten, they were not taken, just killed and left where they dropped. Goats, sheep, and a few calves over the span of about 3 weeks. Different pastures, different property, same general area. At first it was written up as stray dogs. That's the default, I suppose. It always is. But the farmers were pushing back because nothing was being fed on, and some of the injuries did not line up with something a dog could do. Physically impossible. There was too much damage in one go. Too clean in places. Too violent in others. I was I was assigned to set a trap near the trees that separated the two properties. This wasn't at night. It was mid-morning, clear day, sun completely up. I remember it well because it was warmer than it should have been for that time of year. Which, before I continue, also makes me wonder if the strange weather did not have something to do with this thing being in the area. Anyways, I got there and parked my truck near the fence and walked in with the trap and a stake. The pasture sloped down toward a wooded drainage area. You could smell the livestock, the manure, hay, normal farm smells, of course. There was no dead smell, nothing nearby, not that day. I was kneeling down, positioning the trap where the ground was soft, when I felt that sense you get when you're being watched. It was like when a dog is staring at you from behind a fence, just daring you to cross. I stood up and turned around and faced the woods. It was standing right there in the trees. It was fully upright, long arms hanging down, dark fur, thick and coarse, darker than a coyote that I'd ever dealt with. The legs bent backward below the knee like a dog's would. The head was what appeared to be the shape of and the closest I can come to is a Doberman. This thing reminded me of that Anubis Egyptian dog god, like a jackal. It had a very long, skinny snout, and its eyes were level with mine. This thing wasn't a giant, but it was too damn big to be a dog, especially standing up. Nothing about this was normal. This wasn't something glimpsed or half seen. It was right there in open daylight. It was just watching me work. This thing just didn't make any sense. Nothing I could come up with would make me feel any better. Bear did not work. Dog didn't work. Wolf did not work. And wolves weren't even supposed to be there. The thing is too big to be what I deal with for a living. This is out of my league for sure. I reached slowly for my radio on my belt. I kept my eyes on it the whole time. When my hand moved, I don't know if it thought I was reaching for a weapon or what, but it slightly moved. It twitched a bit. It turned its head and looked past me toward the pasture. I backed away, not trying to anger it or trigger a response. I got to the fence and climbed it awkwardly, nearly hurting myself. I tried to keep my eyes on it the whole time. It never crossed the fence. It just stayed there inside the woods. Once I was on the other side, it just turned and walked off. I stood there for a while. I was having problems getting my breathing under control. Obviously, I didn't finish setting the trap. Not after seeing what was out there. The trap wasn't going to do a damn bit of good. I went straight back to my truck and called my boss. I told him exactly what I just saw, exactly the way I just told you. I didn't embellish it. I didn't speculate. I described the size, the posture, the head, the legs. I told him this was not a dog and it wasn't a coyote. There was a long pause on the line. He told me just to finish the assignment and stick to the protocol. I told him I wasn't comfortable staying there alone. He told me to pack up and come back in. When I did get back to the office, he pulled me aside and told me I needed to be careful how I worded my report. He said farmers get nervous, and we don't need panic over misidentified wildlife. And that's how he said it. The report I was instructed to file listed the animal as an unknown canine.
I objected. He told me that was the classification and that if I wanted to keep working cases like this, I needed to stay professional. A week later, I was called into his office again. This time there was HR paperwork. I was told I'd shown poor judgment and unnecessary escalation during a routine field assignment. It was framed as concern for my well-being. I was warned that further incidents, or discussing this one, could affect my position. The traps were never set again in that area. The calls from the farm stopped shortly after, about another month probably. There was no resolution, no explanation given. I finished out my time there, but I stopped volunteering for field assignments near the woods or livestock properties. A couple co-workers started making jokes about werewolves when I walked into the break room. I just ignored them and never responded. Is it wrong of me that some people were so nasty that I almost wished that they would run into one themselves? I don't feel bad about that thought either. Actually, I still hope that they see one. I left that job 2 years after. I know it sounds crazy. I know if you've never seen one, you don't believe it. But I'm telling you what I saw. I didn't stretch any truth. I didn't make anything up. I know how far outside normal this sounds, and it was. I know that the system is built to file things into comfortable boxes that make paperwork easy, not to deal with something that doesn't fit. That makes me angry. If that thing had gone into the pasture while a farmer was out there with his kids, nobody would have been laughing it off as an unknown canine. Anyway, thanks, Reels, for giving people like me a place to unload things like this. These things get heavy to carry over the years. It's a relief to share it with someone who believes you. Name withheld. This encounter came in very close to me. This is actually one county over from where I am currently. Reels. I transferred out of a district that I loved, and the official reason never set right with me. This is the real reason. I was a state park ranger for just over a decade. My encounter happened during a day shift in Carter County, Kentucky, in a park that gets steady foot traffic but still has long stretches where you won't see anyone for hours. I knew all those trails, the overlooks, the problem areas. I'd worked that district long enough to know what belonged out there and what didn't. The call came in just after lunch. Dispatcher told me 2 hikers reported a man in a fur suit off one of the back country trails. That wording mattered later. At the time, I didn't think much of it. We get prank calls, costume sightings, a lot of college kids from the town over messing around. Usually, you check it out, find nothing, and just move on with your day. The description was vague but consistent. Tall, dark, standing still, not bothering anyone but making people uneasy. I took the call because I was the closest. It was a clear day. I had perfect visibility. Nothing that would play tricks on me or make me imagine seeing something from a weird angle. I parked at the nearest trailhead and hiked in alone. That wasn't unusual. Daytime calls almost never require backup unless someone's injured. About a mile or so in, I saw some hikers coming back out. A couple in their 50s. They didn't look hysterical, they looked annoyed more than anything. They pointed toward a side trail and said, "It's back there." Just standing around. Didn't say a word. I asked how close they got. The woman said close enough to know that it's not a person you're about to deal with. That got my attention. I continued on. The side trail led to a ridge overlook that doesn't get much foot traffic. You can see a long way from up there. As I crested the rise, I slowed down and started scanning ahead, trying to spot this thing. It didn't take me long. It was big enough you could see it from a great distance away. This thing was standing near the edge of the overlook, facing away from me at first, standing stock still, completely upright, straight as an arrow. It was too tall for this thing to be a person without them wearing stilts. The shoulders were ungodly wide and set high. The arms were straight, hanging down low to the sides. I stopped walking. When it turned, I got a clear look. This was not a costume. This was not a fur coat. Not even close. What I saw is easily described. It's easy to imagine from this description. Just take any movie that has a werewolf in it, and that's what was standing in front of me. There was no seams, no unnatural movement. This was not a costume. This was not a prank. It was far enough away that I couldn't see its eye color, but it was close enough that I could see the way its chest moved when it breathed. This was not a costume. There's no way. This thing was standing there, as real as you or me. This really messed with my head. I was trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I was supposed to see. It was looking past me, not directly at me, like I wasn't the point of its attention. I reached down slow to grab my radio and I keyed the mic. I told dispatch I had eyes on something that was not a person and not identifiable wildlife. I asked for a supervisor to be notified. There was a long pause. Dispatch came back and asked if the subject was threatening anyone. I said no, but it could get that way. This is not right. They asked if it was approaching me. I said no. They told me to continue observation and not to escalate. Continue observation. Right. While that exchange was happening, the thing moved and stepped back from the edge of the overlook. It turned and walked down slope into the trees. I lost sight of it. I marked the location and hiked back out. I was focused, but I was still shaken. I was terrified, if I'm being honest. This was something that needed to be addressed properly. This is something that should be told publicly. We should have actually got all the people out of that area as soon as it happened. But back at the station, I gave a verbal account to my supervisor. I described the size, the posture, the head, the movement. I was careful with my words. I didn't speculate. I didn't label it anything. He listened without interrupting me. Then he told me we were logging the incident as unidentified individual and closing it. I began to argue and saying this doesn't make sense. This could be dangerous for people, hikers. Why are you doing this? He said no one was harmed, no property was damaged. There's no reason to alarm the visitors. I asked if we were at least putting a temporary advisory on that trail. He told me absolutely not. And I kid you not, this sick SOB looked me in my eye and said hikers exaggerate and that I needed to be mindful of how reports like that would reflect on the park. A few days later, I was called into a meeting with upper management. They didn't accuse me of anything directly. They talked about public perception and maintaining a calm environment. I was told that unless there was an aggressive incident, we don't speculate or warn people. I asked what happens if someone runs into it again, if someone goes missing, or worse. They said we'd handle it if it happened. Then it would be too late, dummies. That answer didn't sit right with me, obviously. Over the next few weeks, I heard from other rangers in the district that they'd been told to route similar calls away from that area or reclassify them as wildlife sightings. Nothing official, just quiet direction. I requested a transfer not long after. On paper, it was voluntary. In reality, I was told it might be better for everyone if I moved to a different district. I finished out my career, but I never forgot standing on that overlook in full daylight, looking at something that did not belong on any chart or training manual. I don't know what you're supposed to do with a damn werewolf, but there it was. What bothered me, honestly, the most was not the creature itself. It was how fast the response shifted from check it out to don't make this a problem. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't put up signs. I followed orders because I had to. And that still haunts me every day. I don't know if anyone was hurt because of my negligence. I hope not. I feel like I'm better off not knowing. Reels, thanks for letting me put this somewhere it won't get filed away and forgotten. You're doing good deeds. And for that, thank you. Anonymous. R.A. I'm in my late 30s now. This happened back when I was 17. There were 4 of us out there that day, and that's part of why I've never known what to do with it. We all walked away with different versions of the same moment, and it's messed with me more than anything else in my life. It was in southern Indiana, outside a small town where everyone knows everyone. That's enough for the location. Just know we were not in deep wilderness. Farm fields, trees, old barns, gravel roads. This is where kids hang out at night because there's nothing else to do. It was early fall, still warm in the evenings. We were parked off a gravel road near a field that had just been cut. There was a line of woods on the far side. We weren't drinking. We weren't messing around. We were just sitting there talking. The 4 of us were me, my cousin, and 2 friends from school. At some point, one of the guys pointed toward the trees and said he thought he saw someone standing there watching us. Of course, we all looked. At first, I thought it was just a person, a tall, dark shape, not moving much. As we were all talking like we were all black belts in jiu-jitsu, I said something like, "Guys, that's not a person." My cousin said it's probably a farmer gonna tell us to leave. One of the other guys was laughing and said, "Nah, that's a dude messing with us." We were already disagreeing, and it hadn't even fully shown itself yet. It stepped out of the trees far enough that we could see more of it. This is where opinions split. I saw it upright. I know that. The shoulders, how wide they were. The length of the arms, which were too long. The head that definitely was not a human because it looked like a damn wolf. My cousin later swore it was hunched like an animal standing weird, not fully upright. One of the other guys said he never saw a head at all, just a dark mass. The last guy said it looked like a big dog walking on its back legs for a second and then dropping back down. But here's the thing. None of us can agree fully on whether it ever dropped to all 4s. I watched it take steps forward, just moving like it wasn't an animal. This thing moved like a human. I remember thinking it looked calm. And honestly, that terrified me more than if it had come rushing at us. The guy who thought it was a prank yelled something stupid like, "Hey," or "What are you doing?" It stopped as soon as he yelled. I don't remember it turning its head. I remember feeling like it was suddenly aware of our presence. That's when I got spooked. I told everyone to get in the truck. A few of them hesitated. One of them laughed. We argued back and forth for a bit. whispering, half shouting all at once. Nobody wanted to look stupid. Nobody wanted to admit they were scared. While all that was happening, it moved again. It was getting closer. That's when everyone finally agreed that we needed to leave. My cousin was driving. He fumbled around with the keys and started the car. I remember the sound as clear as day. How slow the engine turned over, like it always did. That old car was pretty much a junk pile. The headlights went across the field as we pulled forward. It was right at the edge of dark, but there was still some light. For a split second, the light hit it direct. That's the moment about all of this that I can't seem to forget. I saw dark, thick fur. I saw the outline of a canine head. I saw the long arms hanging down past where a person's hands should be. The guy in the back seat swears it didn't have arms like that. He says they were shorter, bent. The other one insists it had glowing eyes. I never saw glowing eyes. I saw eyes reflecting light like an animal would, but not glowing. We sped out of there and no one talked for a solid minute. Then it started. You saw that, right? No, it was just a big dog. It stood up. It didn't stand up. It was a guy in a suit. No way. We argued the whole drive back. When we finally stopped at a gas station, we stood around the car replaying everything. Each one of us certain we were right and the others were wrong and exaggerating. Over the next few weeks, none of us told the story the same way twice. Every time it would come up, details would change. The height, the distance, what it did when the lights hit it. But the feeling stayed the same. Whatever it was, none of us felt like we were supposed to see it. The group fell apart after that. Not because of fighting, just we all drifted apart in different directions. No one wanted to be the one who brought it up again. Years later, I ran into one of them at a wedding. We ended up talking about it. I asked him what he thought it really was. He said, I don't know, I just know what you saw scared you more than what I saw scared me. I still don't know why we didn't see the same thing. I don't know if it changed or if we each caught different pieces of it. All I know is that moment fractured into 4 different memories, and none of them line up clean. If it had just been me, I probably would have just written it off. But it wasn't, and that's the problem. Thanks for letting me send this in and actually giving me some of your time and attention. I truly appreciate it. Anonymous.